everything that we do inherently is through the prism of today, in this human life, what it is that we are doing. And having the vision, the perspective of what eternal life would be in heaven is something that's really, really hard to grasp. And I wanted to try to use that as a conversation point because when we say that God is love and that all of the great things of this world are driven by love, having a little bit of understanding of what it will be like perpetually in God's love in the form of heaven is, I think, a worthy thing to at least think about and ponder.
Yeah, it's really. I just celebrated a funeral yesterday, and someone I've known for a few decades. And at a funeral, we do a couple of different things: remembering the life of the person, remembering the fact that we're all going to die, and then also thinking about heaven and where we're all headed ultimately. What we're made for, let's say, not that we all necessarily get there. It's not take it to be taken for granted. But all the same, thinking about heaven and, as you say, the love that is there in heaven, the perfection of love in heaven, can really blow the dust off some of the things that we tend to accept. We tend to get locked into pretty um, limited uh, relationships where we compromise and accept things that are far from the ideal that we're striving for. And so we settle for relationships in which we're not hurting each other too badly, in which we're not engaging too negatively, in which um, we keep a certain distance to minimize damages, or just avoid people entirely. Um, Even in very loving relationships, we don't necessarily strive for the heights of trust and vulnerability that might be possible, because it requires us and the other person to work on our own stuff. We all have our own woundedness and limitations, and so we kind of skirt around things that are hard. If we're conflict averse, we might just swallow uh, hurts in some way, and accept a lower level of trust and relational engagement because there are things that we don't want to work out or deal with. If we're tend to be a bit of a bull in the china shop, actually slowing down enough to be sensitive, to really listen, to try to understand how someone else is hurt in a way that we don't imagine we would be hurt. Anyway, a lot of different ways that we end up settling for relationships that are much less than they could be. And just to step back and look towards the perfection of love in heaven. What if I were totally healed? What if I were infinitely loved? What if I had God's help? What if the other person were totally purified, healed, infinitely loved, and perfected in love? What would that look like? What does the best relationship look like? What would it look like if every relationship were the best in that way? Um, and yeah, it's good. I sometimes think of it as like looking at the picture on the front of the puzzle box. It's like you do a lot better putting the pieces in place if you have some idea of where those things go and what it looks like, what the finished product looks like. And then I think it also motivates us. We look at, um, I think every kid playing sports loves to look at the professional athletes and get a vision of what I could look like if I worked hard enough. And maybe that's not a guarantee. Not, as I like to say, I will never be a professional basketball player. It doesn't matter how much I watch them. It's just not going to happen. There are certain limitations on our capacities, but all the same, for someone who is talented and has the capacity, for somebody who's learning to play music and has some natural talent to listen to the greats, opens up our capacity to dream and motivates us keep at it, keep practicing, keep performing, keep envisioning what we could be. And the same with heaven. The difference is that we do all have the capacity to love perfectly. Jesus commanded us, love one another as I love you. We have the capacity for divine love. It's something we have to grow into. It's something that requires our own effort and engagement, but we have the capacity for it. So yeah, looking to heaven, dreaming about what that could be like, starting with probably the most loving relationship that we have, and then starting to expand even that relationship to the more that it could be if we were both more healed, and then expanding that to more and more relationships until we start to imagine what it's like to have perfect love for 7 billion people or whatever, however many people have lived in the history of the world, and all of that in the midst of the presence of God. It's a beautiful thing to think about, at least from time to time.
Oh, I absolutely think so. It's your analogy there of looking at a jigsaw puzzle at the front of the box and seeing the picture, I think is spot on for this because even as we're going and building the jigsaw puzzle of our life, it's I can't quite find the right piece. It's somewhere in that box somewhere. It must be flipped over, looking around, and I do a lot of jigsaw puzzles personally, and I have looked at the same hole that I need the piece for and looked at the exact piece at least 15 times before getting it to turn and configure exactly right to be able to get in there. And then, even with that being said, it's still not the same flat, perfect image that you see on the front cover. It still has all the grooves of all the pieces going in there and all these imperfections and lines that there have been times I've been doing challenging ones, by the way. If you're ever doing a puzzle, don't do one that Bob Ross made because he blends them so well. It is so hard to do. Digression. But the point being is that even when it feels like they fit, there's parts where they didn't, and I had to redo it, and then the other pieces aligned. And bringing this up to think about the challenge here of yes, Jesus told us to love like him, but that difficulty because he was able to see the divine love of God. He already knew the love of God the Father. He himself is God the Son. And I think for us, it's hard sometimes even to be able to see what that picture on that box is. What is it that ultimate love would even look or feel like? You use the terms if we were more healed. I don't even know what that means. Like, how do we try to think about what life would be like if we were perfect, if no one's experienced that?
Yeah, I think we get glimpses, tastes. We see it in other people at different times and can start to imagine what that would look like. But you're right, there is also a limit. I mean, St. Paul says explicitly, eye has not seen and ear has not heard what God has prepared for those who love him. St. John says, what we will become, we do not know exactly, but we know that we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So yeah, there's a certain mystery to it for sure, but it's also yeah, somewhat imaginable. One of the things we talk about is the glorified body that has certain qualities like Jesus's risen body, which on the one hand could eat fish, on the other hand could pass through locked doors. And so one of the ways we understand that is that basically the body is totally subject to the will. Whereas now our body doesn't do exactly what we want it to do. I want to run faster. I don't run faster. I want to be somewhere else. I'm not somewhere else. I want to play the piano. I don't play the piano. So our body is not subject to our will now, but one of the qualities of the glorified body is that it will be totally, perfectly subject to our will, totally obedient to our will. And so it will also express, and you could say the inside will be on the outside. Right now, we also have the capacity to use our bodies to spread misinformation. I can keep a poker face. We talk about that. What am I doing with a poker face? I'm hiding
Mhm.
my interior. And the glorified body will not hide our interior by our free choice, but also we will, and we don't always reveal our interior with our bodies perfectly either, even if we want to, but the glorified body will. So the inside will be on the outside. That vulnerability will be total. But like you said, it's a little hard to imagine that, other than in some sense we'll all be walking around naked all the time. That gives a little sense of like, whoa, I don't want everybody to see everything. Oh, just the outside is not everything. They'll see everything on the inside. And then you think like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying. Well, imagine being in a place where it's not terrifying, because actually you're so totally reverenced, so totally loved and appreciated, so protected and cared for. And again, that's where our most intimate, most trusting, most beautiful, most loving relationships give us a hint of what that's like. And then to start to expand that to more and more people. And it's, there are interesting things there. And what does more healed look like? Well, I wouldn't ever want that person to see that thing, or I wouldn't ever want anyone to see that thing. I don't want, and so those places where we're resistant or determined to cover up, where we carry shame, and again, it's not a matter of just having, trying harder and we'll get rid of that. It's really a matter of allowing ourselves to be loved in those places. And that's why our closest relationships and things like spouses or spiritual directors, counselors, closest friends, having some of these people in our lives gives us some practice in sharing some of those deeper, more intimate places in our hearts. And that can bring healing there, as I'm seen in those places of shame and loved and accepted. And then we can start to expand to, well, I really wouldn't want this person who has hurt me so much to see these things. Well, and that's where we have to think about anybody that has hurt me. None of that hurting power can make it into heaven. And so that person will be really transformed in a way that even what hurt me won't be recognizable to me. The things that set me off, the things that trigger me, the things that, some of that is also, transformation in me, that I see the person more clearly, and that those wounds, those places that are sensitive, the scars, as it were, also get healed, so that I'm not quite as triggerable in those places in my heart. But yeah, you could sort of press on all of these things as you see, coming back to what I said originally. I mean, our relationships are so limited, and we have settled, compromised, and allowed for much more limited interactions than we could in some cases. In some cases, it's appropriate. I mean, you're not going to bare your whole heart to your general contractor on one of your houses. I mean, it's not appropriate to the relationship. But especially where we're in relationship with people where we could grow in trust, we could heal, reconcile, repair, we could take the risk to be more open and also more sensitive, listening more deeply. And there are so many relationships that we've just settled for something much less than God has in mind, much less than He has prepared for us in heaven.
Yeah, and then in some capacity, I see all these articles coming out. Maybe it's the way my algorithms are tuned or whatever, but how this AI phenomena that just keeps growing everywhere is actually distancing people more than it is uniting them. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because one of the, like anyone else, it's can your industry be taken over by AI? Can you use it to help you or whatever? And I'm sitting here smack dab in the center of sales, and it can't. I mean, yeah, you can have it do some marketing and make a flashy image or whatever, but you have to be able to understand and connect with people on a real level. And there's this AI thing that you can try to replace it. I kind of look at that as it's like trying to replace a healthy diet with Doritos. Yeah, Doritos taste good and they might make you happy for a little bit, but at some point you're going to wake up and not be able to get out of the door because you'll be too big to fit through the door. And you'll have done it to yourself, which is in line with what everything that we're talking about here is that you can't willpower yourself to do, as you said, to teleport, to run faster, to be 6'9". That's not a willpower thing. And we also know that there is so much limitation in what we're doing in our relationships, and we're willfully going away from that. Is, when there is an area of grievances, or you're upset about something I don't get or accept anymore, it can be really hard to go through that. Like, personally, every Lent, for almost every year we've done this show, I have done eat once a day, and on the days you're not allowed to eat meat, don't eat at all. And as a result of that, there was obviously a lot of transformation that happened, both spiritually and physically. But I really don't accept the notion of you just being upset because you haven't eaten a sandwich yet, and then you can be a magically different person 2 hours later because you ate something. I get that that's a biological thing, but on the other part, I know that I went through this journey. I've done it almost for a decade now, for 40 days at a time, 40 plus days at a time. And I think that that's one of these other things that is important to recognize. And I might have just shown my own deficiency in that answer, is that we all have different ways of seeing what is going to be going on and what can upset us, trigger us, etc., and how we can see that as a limitation, as a barrier that we're putting up, and maybe not even realize that. So, Father, with the last couple of minutes of this episode, could we talk about some ways of perhaps stepping through these limitations that we have, that we may not even know that we're putting up, to help us get closer to loving correctly?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love the sensitivity, the kindness that you show in recognizing. Well, on the one hand, we can't just will ourselves through it, and often we put up these defenses without being aware of it, and uh, and we develop these defenses for a reason. I mean, we've probably been hurt. We've discovered that people are not trustworthy in these places, and so we learn to cover ourselves up in different ways. So it's not just a matter of suddenly letting it all hang out, but and it's not always something that we can just choose to do. It's these are reactions that are precognitive in a lot of cases. We find ourselves, uh, yeah, I don't know, thinking of family gatherings or parties or work environments where we're sort of hiding ourselves from one person, trying to connect with another person, feeling a lot of things and being moved by that without even knowing what we're feeling so much. So I guess I would say that the first thing is probably just self-knowledge. If you think of, are you willing to share whatever, pick some fairly intimate thing with this person? And if not, why not? Well, maybe just because you don't know them that well and the relationship isn't at that point. But maybe there's a guardedness and maybe a fear of being hurt, maybe a past hurt that comes up and gets activated by that. Anyway, it starts to reveal our hearts to ourselves. That's the first step, is to know ourselves well enough to know where we're guarding, where we're covering up, who we're willing to share with. And if we don't trust somebody, why we don't trust them. There might be very good reasons, but could I trust someone more? Could I take a risk in moving forward? Are there barriers in a relationship caused by past hurts? Is that something that I could repair with someone? Could I apologize for something? Could I confront someone with a place I've been hurt and seek to work it out? So, anyway, looking for those places in our own hearts where there is resistance, self protection, and that self knowledge, I think, would be the first step.
And what a beautiful set of actions that we can take in this really important steps of self-evaluation, how to grow, and how to ultimately love, which is the calling that we're all called to do. So we thank you all for being with us today, and we will be with you again next week.